welcome back. We're going to start our panel, and we've got, looks like 6 schools on the live feed. So Lori, take it away.
Great, thank you. Hi, I'm Lori Wolf. Thanks for joining us today. Students, we appreciate your time. And for those of you participating in the challenge, I look forward, as well as some of the panel members and other people involved in this working group, to seeing your final projects. Before we get started, I just want to say thank you to the panel members who joined us here today, as well as to some foundations and generous donors that were able to make this possible. They contributed quite a bit of money to make sure we were able to do this distance learning program, as well as the Sagebrush one in the spring. And those foundations would be the Montana Outdoor Legacy Foundation. It would be Cabela's. It'd be the Ortenberg Claiborne Foundation. It would also be the Phyllis and Denny Washington Foundation. And then I'm just going to go over a few ground rules before we get started. And students, just like you have sometimes in the classroom, we have ground rules for today for not only you, but also our panel members as well. And the first thing I want to just say is, let's really try to be respectful. Let's also try to value differences. Let's not interrupt each other. And then let's also make sure that if we're asking questions, that they're sort of brief and to the point. And we'll do the same on our end in terms of answering them. We'll try to be as brief and concise as possible. And then the last thing is, please turn off your cell phones or put them on silent mode. Thanks, and thank you for participating. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to have the panel members introduce themselves, and then maybe why they're here today or what their role is in grizzly bear conservation and management. So why don't we start that off with Mark? Let's start that off with you.
Thanks, Lori. Hi, everybody. I'm Mark Lambrecht. I'm Director of Government Affairs for the Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation. We are a national nonprofit hunting-based organization. Our headquarters are in Missoula. We have over 234,000 members across the nation and a network of 12,000 volunteers, almost 14,000 members just in the state of Montana. The main thing that we do is try to ensure the future of elk, other wildlife, including predators such as grizzly bears, wolves, and also their habitat and our hunting heritage. Since we were founded in 1984, we have protected or enhanced almost 7.5 million acres of habitat across the country and secured public recreational access to over 1.2 million acres across the country. We strongly believe in the North American model of wildlife management, and part of that is the state wildlife agencies should be managing our wildlife. We strongly believe that management of grizzly bears ought to include management from Montana Fish and Wildlife Parks, and that management should be regulated hunting.
Great, thank you. And Gary, why don't we have you go next?
Yeah, Gary Bertolotti with Montana Fish, Wildlife and Parks. I'm a regional supervisor out of Great Falls, and the area in Great Falls that we are interested in related to grizzly bears is that Rocky Mountain front transition from the wilderness out onto the prairies. My Fish, Wildlife and Parks goals is to preserve, protect, and enhance wildlife of all types within the state boundaries, as well as providing those resources for recreational opportunities for the future generations.
Thank you. Nick?
Hi, I'm Nick Chivak. I'm the Conservation Director for the Montana Wildlife Federation. We are our state's oldest wildlife conservation organization. We were founded in 1936 when hunters joined landowners to restore wildlife. For decades, we did a great job of that with our ungulate species, deer, elk, and antelope. And now we're also enjoying the success of recovery efforts for species like gray wolves and grizzly bears. And our role is working on some projects to prevent conflicts with livestock, and we'll be talking about that. We provide some funding through the National Wildlife Federation to match public dollars to get those programs going, and we'll be talking about that.
Trina.
My name is Trina Bradley. I am the Vice President of Maraes River Livestock Association, which serves 4 counties in the north central Montana area. My husband and I also have a ranch south of Browning where we run cows and bears. And I am here to represent the landowners and the livestock producers and share our side of the story.
Thank you. And let's go to Mitch.
Sure, thank you. I'm Mitch Doherty. I'm the conservation manager with the Vital Ground Foundation based out of Missoula, Montana. We're a land trust with a mission that's focused on protecting habitat and restoring habitat for grizzly bears in North America. As part of our mission, we also work to prevent conflicts between the bears and people as well. That's about it. Thank you.
Good. Erin?
Hello, my name is Erin Edge. I work for Defenders of Wildlife, which is a national nonprofit organization working to restore native and imperiled species in their habitat. I work specifically on grizzly bear and wolf conservation issues. Defenders of Wildlife started the grizzly bear compensation program in the state of Montana in the early 1990s, and then went on to start our grizzly bear conflict mitigation program, which works to prevent conflicts between people and bears. We continue that program today, and luckily have been able to actually expand that program. I also work on grizzly bear policy issues, whether that be state, federal policy changes that may come up. I work to comment on those, as well as like habitat policy changes, such as with the Forest Service or things like that. Yep, that's about it. Thank you.
Thanks, Erin. And then let's go to Bozeman. Julie?
Hi, I'm Julie York. I'm a wildlife biologist with the U.S. Forest Service, and I work on the Custer-Gallatin National Forest, which is a forest that's adjacent to Yellowstone National Park to the north. I work on grizzly bears in kind of two main ways. One is that we do bear-aware education and safety, including bear spray safety. We work a lot with partners, including the Montana Bear Education Working Group. So we have a few seasonal bear-aware technicians. And then I also work on the projects that we do that we implement on the forest, whether those are timber management, timber removal, road building, or trail building. We work at how those projects could affect habitat management for bears and also ways to reduce impacts to grizzly bears.
Thank you. And Kim?
Hi, everybody. My name is Kim Johnston, and I'm the Field Project Manager for People and Carnivores. I work on large carnivore prevention in southwest Montana. People and Carnivores is a nonprofit organization that works to restore and reconnect large carnivore populations while working with the region's people to reduce human and carnivore conflict. And our main goal is to keep people and property safe while keeping large carnivores like grizzly bears, wolves, and mountain lions wild. And so we work with local communities, landowners, ranchers, hikers, different stakeholder groups, sportsmen's groups, as well as agency and tribal members to find ways to reduce conflicts with carnivores. And we use a variety of prevention tools for reducing conflicts. Prevention tools like electric fencing, bear-resistant garbage containers, backcountry food poles to keep bears from accessing food and other attractants. We work with livestock producers on using things like livestock guard dogs, range riders, and herders in their livestock practices, as well as implementing carcass management programs. There's a variety of other prevention tools, such as temporary deterrents like scare devices that can take advantage of a carnivore's natural weariness to human activity. So we just try to help people better understand these tools to prevent conflicts with large carnivores. We also emphasize bear safety training and the use of bear spray. And by helping people understand how to use these tools, we hope to keep bears and other wildlife wild and people and their property safe.
Thank you, Kim.
Thank you. Before you guys start, again, or continue, Lynn, can we just double check that we only have one microphone going because we're getting a little feedback?
I only have this one on at all.
Okay, I think it'll be fine. I was just wanting to double check. Sorry about that. Sorry for the interruption.
Yeah, I heard a little bit of feedback, and I've been trying to figure out what it is. I had two screens last time, just one this time. But I do have two students here, and I think one has a question when we have time.
Great.
All right. So, hi everybody. My name is Danielle Euler. I'm the education coordinator for the Montana Bear Education Working Group. The group I work for is a collaborative group consisting of federal, state, and non-governmental organizations. We include the Forest Service, Fish, Wildlife, and Parks, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, Wildlife Management Institute, Wildlife Conservation Society, and People and Carnivores. So We have a lot of different folks coming from different backgrounds to add their expertise, and our goal as a group is to reduce human and bear conflicts, to create a consistent message so that everybody from all of our partner organizations is saying the same thing about bear safety, and so that people have the knowledge and skills they need when they're in bear country, whether they're living there or recreating there, to feel safe and know what to do to make the best experience for themselves and to stay safe if there are bears around. So that's the basis of what we do. The way we accomplish those goals is by primarily public outreach in a variety of venues. So we go to events like fairs and other large public events. We do training programs with public and our agency partners, and we visit schools. We'll talk to basically any group that asks us, and we are targeting especially folks that are most likely to encounter bears. So whether that's folks who live in bear country or people who are recreating in those areas.
Okay, so we're starting to get a few questions coming in from the students, and I'm going to take this first one from Colstrip High School, and their question is, where are safe areas to relocate bears when needed? And I'll probably pose that question maybe right back to Gary.
Yeah, good question. One of the components that we deal with is taking bears that have gotten into conflict or trying to avoid conflict and capturing them and putting them in places where they won't get into conflict. That is becoming more and more of a difficult issue for Fish, Wildlife, and Parks, for the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, Forest Service, as well as private landowners. And that's due to the number of bears that are now on the landscape. We try to find and identify those areas where few people go, either up near Glacier Park along the Canadian border or in remote locations on public lands that we believe those bears will then find the necessary habitat to stay there. We have found that is not always the case, and so we're always looking for better places to place those bears that we can trap and relocate.
Great. And then, so let's go to Bozeman.
Yes, Lynn, did you say there's a student there in Bozeman that has a question?
Correct.
Yes, let's go to you then.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Hi, my name is Angelo Ciccatelli. I'm a student here at Bozeman, and I'm in the middle of doing my senior project on the conservation of predators, mainly grizzly bears. And I would like to know if they're basically why the season for grizzly bears stopped, and if there's any plans in the near future of maybe starting a new one, and maybe if there is anything that I could do to get involved and help if there's any way at all.
Great. Who wants to take that question on the panel? Maybe. Yeah, let's have Mark. Yeah, okay. So we'll have Mark start it off with the Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation.
Well, I'll try to make a long story short, but as you can imagine, there's been a pretty significant litigation history back and forth, and ultimately the states of Idaho, Wyoming, and Montana signed a memorandum of agreement to try to move forward with a management plan that would include limited regulated hunting. Montana decided to take a pass on the first year to see how things went. Wyoming and Idaho decided to move forward, and ultimately a judge in Missoula took a case that was designed to prevent that hunt from occurring. There were a couple of delays, and then ultimately the hunt was stopped the day before the hunt was supposed to occur. The main message from the judge there was the states were supposed to determine what would be the impact of remnant populations of grizzlies, such as in the Bitterroots or some of the areas outside of the greater Yellowstone area or the Northern Continental Divide population. What would the impacts be before a hunt could occur? So that's kind of where we are now. And then we're back in the situation now where the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service has to determine whether or not it's going to appeal that ruling.
Great. And Gary, did you want to add anything to that?
Could I have him repeat the crux of the question?
Yes. Can you repeat the crux of the question again?
Yeah, so I just want to know, I guess I just heard why the season was stopped, but I want to know if there's anything coming forward, maybe trying to reestablish this season in any way, and if there's anything I could do to help or get involved with that.
Yeah, so as Mark stated, litigation has stopped what was once the potential for a hunting season in all 3 states. Montana decided not to pursue that at this time, hoping that the delisting would hold, but it didn't. We, FWP, with our Fish and Wildlife Commission, has put together a model for hunting once we determine hunting is a viable tool, and we have a management plan in place that will provide justification for using that tool, showing that it won't be harmful for the overall population. How do you get involved in that is basically work with us as a agency to support grizzly bear delisting, because until it's delisted, we won't even have that option. The other one would be to talk to your legislators and let them know that you would like to see the delisting process proceed as it was originally intended.
Great. I'm wondering if some of our students from PAL have a question or two to address to the panels. Yes.
So now that the delisting is like kind of in the process, is there any concerns hunting them now that they don't cover nearly the area that they originally did?
Can you say that a little louder?
So, like now that the delisting is like kind of in process, are there like any concerns hunting them now that they don't cover nearly the amount of area that they used to?
So their natural range has shrunk according to the information we saw. Is that a concern as hunting is discussed, or do the experts feel pretty comfortable with grizzly bear habitat and range and the numbers?
I'll take that on. It's
you know what? Let's repeat it again, just to be sure it's loud enough for everybody, because I'm sure the student in Bozeman's going to be really interested in this.
So the question was, you know, with delisting in the process now, although currently that is the delisting was overturned in court. Would there be a concern that hunting would affect grizzly bear numbers and range, given that they only occupy a small portion of their historic range? You know, grizzly, the delisting, we need to know it was only on one specific population, and that was the greater Yellowstone ecosystem. And you know, from a broad wildlife conservation standpoint, the hunt that would have been proposed would have been a complete non-issue on the overall population, because, you know, Montana's, for example, was looking at, well, Montana didn't even propose a hunt the first year. They said, how are we going to, you know, we're going to proceed slowly, but the total population is more than 700 bears. Now, I will say that Wyoming's hunt proposal, and the science is pretty clear, and I think this really hurt the court case. Wyoming's hunt package would have probably had some impact on their ability to expand both their range and suitable habitat there, as well as numbers, because they didn't put a subquota on females. But that applied to bears outside of what they call the designated surveillance area. So I will say that I think Wyoming's hunt package did hurt the court case. Anyway.
Thank you, Nick. Does anybody else on the panel want to comment on that?
I would just say that grizzly bear habitat, all the working groups that are helping to support grizzly bear recovery are working to expand and secure habitat for grizzly bears into the future. It will never be what it was in the 1700s, 1800s. But the core populations that we're dealing with will be secure, their habitats will be secure as we move towards delisting.
And the real linchpin to that will be the state of Montana, because we contain almost all the habitat that really is between the greater Yellowstone population of bears and the northern continental divide. So Montana is really the key.
I had one thing on that. Yeah. Part of the question was, what would the impact of hunting be on, you know, the numbers of grizzly bears across the range? And I just wanted to state, so maybe everybody's clear on this. Hunting grizzly bears will drive public interest in making sure there are grizzly bears for future generations. Just like hunters have been responsible for recovery of almost every species, and also paying for recovery of game species and non-game species and endangered species just the same through purchase of hunting licenses and also excise taxes on hunting equipment and ammunition.
Thank you. Okay, so we're going to go to another question, and this is from Corvallis High School. What other steps do managers take to help landowners avoid bear interactions? Is there anything besides what landowners have to do, for instance, electric fences, I guess they were
Bear boxes,
a
little pencil
etc.
bites these, so it takes a while.
So let me start that over. Are they done? I can't tell.
No, yeah.
Let's jump to the first question.
Yeah.
So what other steps do managers take to help landowners avoid bear interactions? So I'm going to pose that question to, let's pose that question to Erin and then maybe follow up with Kim.
Sure. I think, I guess it sounded like the question was directed at bear managers, though. Is that correct? So, I mean, I guess I could speak for
bear managers as well, since we don't actually have a bear manager on the panel. Maybe you can tell us what you've seen in your work. What other steps do they take?
One thing that we haven't really talked too much about is what some of the communities have done is set up these neighborhood networks where they improve just communication between neighbors. So there is, if a bear manager is in a specific area, they can talk to, say, a community leader or find somebody in the community that kind of pulls everybody together, and then whether it's through phone trees or through social media, start letting people know when bears are active in an area. So for instance, in the Missoula area, we have a website called missoulabears.org. And on there, we can post things like black bear with cubs in so-and-so neighborhood. And that has seemed to increase not only communication between the agency and the local residents, but local residents talk to each other. And then as that grows, the information about bird feeders and garbage and all that kind of comes along with it. But it was improving that base communication first that really helped.
Great, thank you. Does anybody else on the panel want to comment on that?
I would
Go ahead.
I would add a couple things. I mean, the bear specialists are out there finding attractants, assisting with landowners and anybody else that has an attractant out there, and trying to prevent those attractants from becoming, from bears becoming attracted to them. They clean up grain spills, they clean up apples in people's yards. They'll work with livestock producers to remove carcasses before bears find them. There's a whole host of things that we're doing out there to avoid attracting bears to an area where conflict could occur.
Kim, did you want to add to that?
Well, just along those same lines that Erin added in, as far as not only are we out on the ground helping them learn these tools and implement them, but also increasing communication between the agencies and the landowners themselves is a really important component. Putting a lot of bear information and resources out there, so the public really wants to see these animals out in the landscape, but the landowners are taking a lot of the impact from having those animals on their own property. So helping bringing those outside resources to the community so they have availability to these tools. But also a bear education is a big component, helping people understand why they're seeing the bears, maybe during times where they're going to expect to see more conflicts or less. So just helping them understand why these animals are there, I think, can help them just better understand how they can prevent these conflicts in the future.
Okay.
So I do. So the biggest thing for the landowners is when we're dealing with these bear managers is we are looking for some empathy or maybe some sympathy or maybe some understanding, because we're the ones that are housing these bears and we're the ones that are dealing with them every single day. And when we have somebody from the government say, let me come tell you how to run your ranch better so that you have fewer conflicts, you can imagine how we feel, because we are professionals. We're, it's not my first rodeo. So what I would like is for these bear managers and everyone up the ladder, and I mean the FWP director, to understand that we are doing the best that we can, and we are responsible for all this private land that the bears are living on, and they should take into consideration what we think once in a while, because we're pretty good at what we do.
Thanks, Trina. All right, I'm going to tackle another question here, and this is from Colstrip.
No, Cupbank.
Cupbank, sorry, Cupbank. Okay, I'm going to address this question to Mitch. The question is, are there any plans to change or modify bear habitat to provide further protections?
Well, I think there's a couple different levels you could look at this. You know, from a public land standpoint, I think Mark's touched on this a couple times today. Habitat improvement projects, restoration on those public lands is critical to, you know, providing good habitat for bears and other wildlife. On the private land end of things, a lot of that is, you know, the work we do at Vital Ground is with landowners one-on-one on a voluntary basis. And so, you know, in addition to seeing that habitat protected, we oftentimes look for opportunities to improve that habitat through grant funding, working with partners and things along those lines on the ground.
Can I add something to that?
Yep.
Good points, Mitch. Some of the other things that are occurring that a lot of the public hasn't heard about yet, but last year the Secretary of the Interior issued a secretarial order ordering the department's federal land management agencies to identify, we'll work with the western states to identify wildlife migration corridors, and then also plans to try to conserve those so that mainly big game species, but also there will be associated benefits to grizzly bears and other predators to be able to move across those landscapes as they need to. And that includes trying to do acquisitions and key easements to conserve those lands and make sense of development in those areas, and also provide infrastructure crossings, highway crossings, railroad crossings, things like that. A lot of people have seen those types of developments up. If you're driving up to Flathead Lake from Missoula, you'll see some of those, and some others around the state. So there are measures being undertaken at the federal and state level to try to deal with some habitat changes and needs for grizzly bears.
Great, thank you, Mark. Okay, I have another question that came in from Corvallis, and the question is, and this is probably addressed more to you, Trina, is how have grizzly bears affected your livestock? How much money you're getting? If you've prevented this, how have you, or how much money, maybe not a specific dollar, have you put in? So basically, just in general, how have the bears affected your livestock, and how much money you make off your livestock, and how much does it probably cost you for preventative measures?
Okay, so we were just talking about this at lunch. Bears cause stress for our cows. I mean, if you have an apex predator hanging around in your pasture and you eat grass, you're probably going to be nervous most of your life. So that absolutely affects things. The other thing is our cows are so used to bears that they chase them. So probably less stress for our cows than for cows that haven't been exposed to them for years and years. As far as dollar amounts, we haven't done a lot in terms of fencing or anything like that. So because we live there and we just want to make it work the way that we make it work, and we don't want to have to hide behind an electric fence. So that hasn't really affected us. The thing that most affects our bottom line is the losses, because we have a lot of losses on the creek that we can't find, or we are not brave enough to go look for, or whatever, and you have to produce a body in order to get paid from the Livestock Loss Board. So we lose calves every year just to that. We lose calves every year from the cows running and trampling the calves. You also don't get paid for collateral damage. So you have to keep in mind that when we sell our calves in the fall, they're worth about $1,000 a head. So if you lose 5 or 6 or 7 to bears, that's a huge loss for us. And we don't get reimbursed for that. We just have to deal with it and move on.
Great, thank you, Trina. Okay, I have another question, and this is from Colstrip, and I'm going to pose this to Julie and perhaps Danielle over in Bozeman. So are there safety classes offered to teach the public about bears and bear safety? And then there's also kind of a follow-up to that from Cutbank, sort of along the similar lines. Do you have programs or ideas for good ways to educate people quickly? So are there safety classes offered to the public? And is there any easy ones?
So this is Julie. So we do have a variety of means of getting out to the public, and a lot of those are with the partners that we mentioned earlier, the Montana Bear Education Working Group and carnivores. We have events that we go to train people on bear education, bear ecology, and the use of bear spray. We'll hold different event days in our communities in the different towns surrounding the National Forest. So we do have those, quite a variety, and we do those primarily through the summer season, May to September. But Danielle can talk about this more. She's now year-round, and she's doing other events throughout the year. I'll turn it over to you.
Yeah, so the big answer is absolutely. We have a lot of opportunities for bear safety and like bear spray training, and we are willing to offer it to almost anybody within reason, as far as we have resources and people to go offer those presentations. So if you guys in your communities think that's something you're interested in, Lori can put you in contact with me. And so absolutely, we focus on prevention and the use of bear spray, so preventing bear encounters, preventing bears from being attracted to residences or camps or whatever it might be. And then the quickest way, we have, I guess, bear safety is nuanced, so we can try to abbreviate it, but the more time we have to talk about it, the more in depth and the more accurate our information can be. So we can give a quick, what's that?
What about IGBC?
Oh yeah, and so we can always refer people to the Interagency Grizzly Bear Committee's website, igbconline.org, and that's a great resource that people can explore more information and watch videos, even contact someone to ask questions. So yeah.
Okay. We're going to just check in with our live students. Not that you guys on the stream aren't live, but are in studio students. Bozeman, did you have any question for any of the panelists at this point?
We're good for now. Thank you.
Al, do you all? Yes, sir.
I've got a question. It's kind of two questions, and so I'll split it up in two different sections. But first of all, could all of you kind of quantify how receptive the public has been to some of these changes and discussions? I understand there's some animosity. Maybe landowners don't like being told how to run their land, or elk hunters don't like being told, what to do necessarily. But overall, do you think that Montanans in general have been willing to listen and try to find resolutions? And what kind of struggles have you encountered as this discussion has continued? And then my second question, which I'll come back to and talk more about, I'm wondering more about how successful you are when relocating bears and how often reoffenses occur. But let's start with the first question, the public. What kind of challenges have you encountered when dealing with landowners, hunters, outdoorsmen, and women, so on and so forth?
If I could take that, I'll start it off.
And we're going to
The four of us went to lunch on the break here, and that's one of the things we were talking about is what a challenge it is to have more of the general public understand what it is we're talking about here. There's just been such a Disneyfication of certain predators that especially applies to grizzly bears, where people give them names and think they're cute, cuddly creatures rather than apex predators. But it's certainly a challenge for us to help the general public understand the need for hunting such a species and how that can actually help that species in the long run. So that's difficult for us. I think most hunters understand that. We're going to have predators like grizzly bears and gray wolves on the landscape, and you have to make adjustments to keep yourself safe or to be a successful hunter. That's why we advocate for making sure we're taking care of the habitat, and that benefits all wildlife.
Sure.
So
I'd like
what I
to
would say about that.
add to that. I do think last year I wrote a livestock loss grant that we got National Wildlife Federation to come in and put up matching dollars to clean up boneyards on the Rocky Mountain front end. And I wrote in the grant this valued native wildlife species, and I was really challenged by a member of the Livestock Loss Board who lives up on the front. She said, valued? And I said, yes, they are. I mean, this is our state animal. It's the logo of our wildlife agency and the mascot of one of our public universities. But there is broad support for grizzly bears. But at the same time, I think a lot of people in certain areas of the state don't understand what it's like for people like Trina to live with them day in and day out. So it's going to take that. The broad support is there. What we need is the broad understanding of the challenges of living with an animal like this.
Yeah, and I'd add one component to that. As grizzly bear numbers increase, they are expanding their presence out into areas where individuals, farmers, communities haven't experienced them. And that education component is critical to maintain support for grizzly bears and delisting. Conflict does not help anybody. And so there is a learning curve for those that have not had to experience it like Trina has for years. And even with Trina, more and more bears on the ground mean more and more issues that she has to deal with. So it's always a battle to get people informed and to continue on the course of delisting.
So I also have something to add to that. So in continuing all of this, from a livestock producer's perspective, there's more public support for grizzly bears than there is public support for private landowners that house grizzly bears. So I get a lot of comments like, if you don't like having bears, why don't you just move? Or if you don't want the bears to kill your cows, why don't you just not have cows because we can get our meat at the store? And those people aren't necessarily idiots, they just don't understand. And so my job as a livestock producer is to educate people and share information with them and say, a lot of wildlife live on private land, and if it weren't for us, you would be hard pressed to see any wildlife in the state of Montana because they just wouldn't have any place to live. So along with public support for recovering grizzly bears, we need public support for those of us that are hosting these grizzly bears, whether or not we want to.
Great, thank you. And then to answer the second half of your question, I'm just going to ask for one person to respond to that so we can move on to a couple other questions. But what was your second half about relocating bears?
Yeah, well, it's great answers, thank you. And I think education is key to this. And that's why what you guys are doing is so awesome. Thanks for being here. This is a great opportunity. The second question, let's say a young grizzly goes onto Trina's ranch and is harassing her cattle. So it's captured, it's relocated. What are the chances that that bear will forget that behavior, unlearn that behavior, and go back to more natural behavior? Or what are the chances of reoffending and having to maybe put that bear down? How successful is relocation, I guess is the crux of the question.
Okay, Gary, you want to answer that?
Yeah, so I'll answer that. And the answer isn't simple. The answer is bear-related, individual bear-related. The issue that the bear is involved in, like I've said in the past, we trap, relocate bears. We've had them come back to the exact same location, do the exact same thing that they did before within 7 days, even though it's hundreds of miles away. And then we've had bears that we've moved, that were in conflict, never see them for years, and then all of a sudden show up. So it's not a... Rocky Mountain front into isolated locations on identified places to release them, about 50% of the time they come back.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Gary. I'm going to move on to another question, and this is from.
Before we do that, I just want to say that there is a question from Cut Bank. Love you, Cut Bank. And asking about a tribal representation. And just so that you know, for everyone involved, the tribal representatives were absolutely invited and just couldn't make it because of crazy travel and that kind of thing. But what we're going to do is make sure that they get these questions and the recording so that they can weigh in also. So thank you for that, Cut Bank.
Okay, and then the other question I got from Cut Bank is, as far as population monitoring, what agencies or groups are involved or responsible? Will this stay the same in the future? How is it funded, or is it funded? So what groups are involved in population monitoring? And then also, will it stay the same in the future, and how is it funded?
So I'll take that real quick. So monitoring the tribes, both Salish Kootenai and on the northern continental line, Salish Kootenai, the Blackfeet tribes are integral in monitoring grizzly bears and managing grizzly bears. They fish wildlife and parks, U.S. Forest Service, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, the NCDE group, as well as the IGBC. In the Yellowstone ecosystem, there's a similar conglomerate of participating agencies monitoring and watching grizzly bear numbers as well as where they are.
Great, thank you. And then I have another question from Corvallis High School. And the question is, and I'm going to pose this to you, Aaron, start off, with bears using human resources, for example, livestock and crops for food, which we know is devastating for the affected farmers and ranchers, but is this change in diet harmful for the bears? What can we do to help bears stay on natural food sources?
So I think if you ask a corn-fed bear if his diet's bad, he'll disagree with you. But but these diet, the thing is that sometimes bears can get into things that aren't good for them, whether that be the foam out of an ATV seat. I mean, bears will eat crazy things, and so sometimes the actual item they eat is bad for them. But I think when you think of it from a bear's perspective, they're following their nose, and what's more harmful to the bear is the actual interaction. So it's the fact that the bear is close to the home. It's the fact that the bear is eating somebody's livestock. It's the fact. So, and that has management implications. So that bear can learn that a house means, great, this is where I get awesome food. Or that bear can learn, I should avoid that location. And I think what we would like to see is that the bear looks at a house and goes, I should avoid that location. So I think it may not be the actual food item that makes the bear sick directly. It's the action of getting into food near people's residences or breaking into property and that kind of thing that can be harmful to the bear.
Okay, great. Thank you, Aaron. So we're getting close to the end of the session, so we're going to wrap it up. And for those students that did post questions that were not addressed, we're keeping track of those questions, and we will get those answers to you probably at the beginning of the next week at the latest. So we're going to go around now with the panel members, and we're going to have them tell the students in a brief sentence what is the one thing that they hope that the students go away with today. And I'm going to start off with you, Kim Johnston.
Okay, hopefully everyone can hear me okay. So if you guys want to take away one point as you're thinking about developing conflict prevention programs for communities, the important thing here is just to involve all the stakeholders and work together to develop solutions to reducing conflicts across the landscape. And especially with us stakeholders, we might all have different views and opinions, but we also have a lot of things in common. I think we all can agree we like to see wildlife populations stay wild. We want to see people and their property safe, and we want to overall reduce conflicts. So even though these varying stakeholders have different opinions, we do have a lot in common. And I think it's important to find that common ground and work together to develop solutions that can work for people and wildlife.
This is Julie. I would just encourage people, especially students, to just educate themselves on what that means to be bear aware and living a more safe way around bears in bear country, whether you're living there, working, or recreating, especially on public lands.
Hey, this is Danielle. So I would like all of you to just realize that in your short lives so far, this is a really important time in conservation of wildlife and where people and wildlife meet, and that not too long in the future, you guys are going to be in charge of this. So I really appreciate you being here, and I want you to remember that there's always more to the story, and there's a lot of nuance to this issue, and it's always important to give everyone a chance to voice their values here.
Thank you, Danielle. And then let's go to Mitch.
Sure. Thanks everyone for participating. From Vital Ground standpoint, we think there's, it's a two-prong approach to sustainability and recovery of grizzly bears. And one is, for the bears, providing them the habitat they need to roam and the security they need there out on the landscape. And two, it's for the folks, the people on the landscape, providing them the tools they need to live with wildlife. And so I think those two things together, create a really good solution.
Thanks, Mitch. And Erin?
Yeah, I think I'll echo a little bit of what Kim said, in that I think it's really important to take away that, we all have varying perspectives, but that they're all, each perspective is of value, and that when we look at each other and sit down and have a conversation with each other, we can come to solutions that benefit all of us. And I think we value grizzly bears, we value people, and we need to figure out solutions that make it work for both.
Thank you. And then Trina?
Yeah, as we talk about conservation and prevention and recovery, I just want everybody to remember that human safety is the #1 issue when we're going through this. And these grizzly bears may look like cute, fluffy forest puppies, but they will kill you and they will eat you. So keep that in mind when you're coming up with all these plans.
Thank you. Mark?
Well, I hope that what you'll all take away from this is that habitat is the most important factor for grizzly bears, or all wild animals for that matter. Because of fire suppression, fractured land ownership patterns, and a lack of active forest management, we have less quality wildlife habitat in Montana and the region. Bears will move to find it, and that is the main cause of conflict between humans and grizzly bears, is lack of habitat.
Thanks, Mark. Gary?
Yeah, I think the one thing I take away from this is the recovery of grizzly bears from where they were once in the 1970s is a success story that was promulgated by partners across the landscape, whether it be private landowners, government agencies, NGOs. It is the partnerships that have created this success. And as we move forward for delisting, it will be those partners that keep bears on the landscape for the future.
Thanks, Gary. And Nick, you're going to wrap it up for us.
Yeah, I agree with everything that's been said. The grizzly bears, it is a tremendous success where we're at with this species. We know how to live with grizzly bears in the heart of the Bob Marshall Wilderness and Glacier Park. It's these bears pushing out into places where they were prehistorically but haven't been for decades. They've gotten ahead of their social tolerance. And I agree, people like Trina Bradley provide tremendous habitat for these animals, but we have to help build that tolerance, accepting that these people, they love wildlife. That's why they're out on the land. And so we need to give them the tools to be successful if this species will continue to expand its range and numbers.
Thank you, Nick. And thank you to all of the panelists who joined us today and all of you students. And I know that there were some questions that we didn't get to, but I'll make sure that all the panel members will see those questions, and then we'll give them an opportunity to sort of weigh in. But thanks for joining us, and we look forward to your projects, your final projects.
Let's give everybody a round of applause, students and panelists.